Welcome to our Good Friday service together. And as we start our time together, listen to this from Luke chapter 23 and verse 46. Then Jesus said, calling out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And having said this, he breathed his last. It's sobering, isn't it? Jesus, who's God, breathes his last, died and gone.
These are the days of Elijah, declaring the word of the Lord. And these are the days of your servant Moses, righteousness being restored. And though these are days of great trials, of famine and darkness and sword, still we are the voice in the desert crying, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Behold, he comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. At the trumpet call, so lift your voice. It's the year of Jubilee, and out of Zion's hills salvation comes. These are the days of Ezekiel, the dry bones becoming as flesh. And these are the days of your servant David, rebuilding a temple of praise. And though these are days of the harvest, the fields are as white in your world, and we are the laborers in your vineyard, declaring the way of the Lord. Behold, he comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. At the trumpet call, so lift your voice. It's the year of Jubilee, and out of Zion's hill salvation comes. There's no God like Jehovah. 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 Behold, he comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. At the trumpet call, so lift your voice. It's the year of Jubilee, and out of Zion's hill salvation comes. Behold, he comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. At the trumpet call, so lift your voice. It's the year of Jubilee, and out of Zion's hill salvation comes. So lift your voice. It's the year of Jubilee, and out of Zion's hill salvation comes.
Matthew 26, 1-5. When Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, the Passover is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." Then the chief priests and the elders of the people assembled in the place of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and they schemed to arrest Jesus secretly to kill him, but not during the festival, they said, where there may be a riot among the people. 14 to 16. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked them, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?" So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. 47 to 56. While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man, arrest him." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend." Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. With that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Put your sword back in its place," Jesus said to him, "for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you not think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen in this way?" In that hour Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I leading a rebellion that you have come out with swords and clubs to catch me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me. But this has all taken place that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Summer and winter, and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, join with all nature in manifest witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin, and a peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings are mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
Let's pray together. Lord, this is a sobering day. We remember your death and how horrible it must have been for you. the beatings, the crown of thorns, the nails, and the rough wooden cross. But separation from your Father, the horrible concept of that beyond comprehension. Yet it is an act of love towards us. All we can say is thank you, thank you, thank you.
When I survey the wondrous cross on which the Prince of Glory died, my richest gain I count but loss, and pour contempt on all my pride.
Forbid, Lord, that I should boast, save in the death of Christ my God. All the vain things that charm me most, I sacrifice them to His blood. See from His head, His hands, His feet, sorrow and love flow mingled down. Did there such love and sorrow meet? Oh, thorns composed so rich a crown, were the whole world of nature to mine, that were an offering far too small. Love so amazing, sing so divine, demands my soul, my life, my all.
The concept of the Easter story is interesting. The reality that people killed God is a bit much to take, isn't it? That He was treated so badly is still incredulous in our minds. Even more so, He allowed it to happen. Let's have a look at a few things about this whole scenario. And Jesus was taken into custody in a very, very weird way. Luke chapter 22 and verses 47 through to 53 say this. While He was speaking, there came a crowd, and the man called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He drew near to Jesus to kiss Him, But Jesus said to him, Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? And when those who were around him saw what would follow, they said, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, no more of this. And he touched his ear and he healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests and the officers of the temple and elders who had come out against him, have you come out against a robber with swords and clubs? When I was with you day after day in the temple, you did not lay hands on me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness. It's staggering, isn't it? Jesus is betrayed by a kiss. Probably seems weirder to us than the original readers. The kiss thing was kind of like a greeting. So maybe contextualizing it today, it would have been a handshake, a symbol of agreement in many ways, but in this case, a sign that was really of deception. From there's one court case after the other. And technically, courts weren't supposed to actually operate after dark. So this appears pretty irregular. And it continues with beatings throughout the night and then more court in the morning. What a morning it was. Luke 22, 66 to 67 says, when day came, the assembly of elders of the people gathered together, both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council. And they said, if you are the Christ, tell us. But he said to them, if I tell you, you will not believe. Whoa. He really says it, doesn't he? And it continues, though, in Luke 23, 1 to 5. Then the whole company of them arose and brought him to Pilate. In other words, he's going to another court case. And they began to accuse him, saying, we found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is a Christ and a king. And Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? And he answered him, you have said so. Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, I find no guilt in this man. But they were urgent, saying, he stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee even to this place. Notice here, he's referred to as the King of the Jews. But also, the person who calls him the King of the Jews says he has no guilt. Did he actually believe it? And things continue to happen, and some of them are still irregular. And we can say, well, it was a setup, wasn't it? They get the verdict they want because they manipulated it. Then Jesus is sentenced to death. Once that is put in motion, things move quickly. He carries his own cross, and they have beaten him so badly, his strength gives out, and somebody else is assigned to finish the carrying of the cross. And he's nailed to the cross, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Then the cross is dropped in a hole and he is hung in the air. Luke 23 verses 35 to 38 says this. And the people stood by watching, but the rulers scoffed at him, saying, he saved others, let him save himself. If he is the Christ of God, his chosen one. The soldiers too mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, if you're the King of the Jews, save yourself. There was also no inscription over him. This is the King of the Jews. Notice something here. Jesus is not only said to be King of the Jews, he's labelled, physically labelled as King of the Jews. He's been asked if he's King of the Jews, and now he's labelled as the King of the Jews. The story goes on. In Luke 24, 44 and forward. It was now about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour, while the sun's light failed. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, calling out with a loud voice, said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Having said this, he breathed his last. Now when the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God, saying, "Certainly this man was innocent." And all the crowds that had assembled for this spectacle, when they saw what had taken place, they returned home beating their breasts. And all his acquaintances and the women who had followed him from Galilee stood at a distance watching these things. Notice too here, people think Jesus is innocent. Pilate thought he wasn't guilty. The soldier thought he wasn't guilty. But hey, everybody else wanted him dead. We get from all this, some think he's innocent, not guilty. Others think that he is the King of the Jews. Others wanted him dead. There's such confusion in it. But where does it leave us all these years later? What do we think Jesus is? Was he guilty? Did he deserve it? Do we want Jesus alive in our lives? And hey, they're really good questions. The idea of Easter is that we reflect on the events that took place. And today is the day that we reflect on whether we thought Jesus deserved to die or not.
Man of sorrows, what a name for the Son of God who came, ruin sinners to reclaim. Hallelujah, what a Savior, bearing shame and scoffing rude, in my place condemned he stood, sealed my pardon with his blood. Hallelujah, what a Savior.
Guilty, vile, and helpless we, spotless Lamb of God was he. Full atonement, can it be?
Hallelujah, what a Savior.
Lifted up was he to die. It is finished was his cry. Now in heaven exalted high.
Hallelujah, what a Savior.
When he comes, our glorious King, all his ransomed home to bring, then anew this song we'll sing.
Hallelujah, what a Savior. Hallelujah, what a Savior. Hallelujah, what a Savior. Hallelujah, what a Savior.
Let's continue to reflect throughout today. And we look just briefly at a couple of verses from Luke 23, 52 to 56. This man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then they took it down and wrapped it in a linen shroud and laid him in a tomb cut in stone where no one had ever laid before. It was the day of preparation and the Sabbath was beginning. The women who had come with him from Galilee followed and saw the tomb and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments.